While millions of people scream, cry, and suffer over a match played by strangers, you observe all that with a silent doubt. Why don't I feel anything? Why don't I care? Is there something wrong with me? But there is an even more disturbing question. What if the problem isn't you, but the collective illusion that everyone accepted? And if your brain simply refused to fall for it, stay. Because understanding this changes the story completely. To understand why sports fans react with such intensity, you first have to stop seeing them as exaggerated. They aren't crazy. They are operating with an extremely ancient mental system. For thousands of years, human survival depended on one thing: the group. If your tribe won a battle, you ate. If it lost, you died. The brain learned very quickly that loyalty to the group was life or death. The problem is that this system was never updated. In the heart of the 21st century, that same wiring remains active. The difference is that now the tribe is no longer a community that guarantees your survival, but a sports team. For a fan's brain, there is no real difference between a defeat on the field and a profound social threat. When their team wins, their body releases oxytocin, the same hormone linked to bonding and belonging. When they lose, cortisol spikes as if they had suffered an attack. Neuroscience studies show that watching your team lose activates the same brain areas as social rejection or physical pain. The limbic system reacts as if the situation were critical. This is where the key difference with you appears. Your brain didn't fall for that error. You see 11 people in the same jersey, and your amygdala doesn't register them as your tribe. Your prefrontal cortex stays active, analyzing the situation for what it is: entertainment. There is no threat, no survival at stake. The reason sports fans can't stop watching games isn't the quality of the play. It's the chemistry. Sports work on the same psychological principle as slot machines: intermittent reinforcement. You never know if your team is going to win or lose, and that uncertainty turns every game into an emotional lottery. When their team scores, the brain releases a burst of dopamine. Euphoria, excitement, a momentary feeling of personal victory. But when the team loses, dopamine drops sharply. Frustration, sadness, and in many cases, real grief appear. Not symbolic, real. The brain does not distinguish between a personal loss and someone else's defeat. Research shows that the most intense fans experience dopamine fluctuations of up to 20% above their baseline during matches. That neurochemical volatility is the same seen in people with gambling addictions. Every weekend, their emotional system is completely hijacked. However, your brain asks a question that theirs does not formulate. Why delegate my happiness to people who don't know I exist? That's why you are less vulnerable to parasocial relationships, those one-way emotional bonds where one side feels and the other doesn't even respond. You seek real connection, authentic conversations, bonds where there is reciprocity. For a fan, the emotion comes from an imaginary relationship. For you, that is not enough. You are not designed for that type of stimulus. It's not coldness, it's a more demanding psychological filter. There is a linguistic detail that reveals much more than it seems. When a fan talks about their team and they win, they say, "We won." When they lose, they say, "They lost." That small change of pronoun is not accidental. It's the ego protecting itself. It's the fusion of the self with the group when it's convenient, and the separation when it hurts. For many fans, the team isn't just entertainment. It's a key piece of their identity. The crest becomes part of who they are. The jersey is symbolic armor. The stadium, a temple. Psychologist Henry Tajfel explained it clearly through social identity theory. When individual identity is weak, people cling more strongly to group identities to feel valuable. The louder someone shouts for their team, the quieter their personal identity usually is. The group completes what is missing inside. But in your case, the opposite happens. Your sense of who you are doesn't depend on an external symbol. You don't need someone else's victory to feel like somebody. You have built your identity from internal values, personal achievements, and your own interests. Psychology calls this intrinsic identity. Fans depend on an extrinsic, borrowed identity, conditioned on the performance of others. You are already complete. They are still looking for pieces outside. You do have empathy, and a lot of it. The difference is that you don't waste it. Neuroscientist Paul Zak discovered that human beings have a limited budget of empathy. We can only care deeply about a finite number of things before entering a sort of emotional bankruptcy. Sports fans spend a huge part of that budget on millionaire athletes they will never meet. It is estimated that an average NFL fan spends about 11 hours a week watching games, checking scores, and arguing online. That equals more than 500 hours a year emotionally invested in people who wouldn't recognize their face. That empathy is not being used on friends, family, or personal growth. When their team loses, they are devastated during days. In contrast, when someone close to you needs help, you are there. That isn't coldness, it's strategic emotional intelligence. Studies from the Stanford Center for Compassion show that those who direct their empathy toward reciprocal relationships experience less emotional burnout and greater life satisfaction. You aren't avoiding connection. You are avoiding a one-way emotional investment. Fans say they watch sports for the excitement, but what they are really chasing is something deeper, the flow state. That mental moment in which time disappears, attention becomes total, and the person feels fully alive. Sports offer small doses of vicarious flow, an indirect version obtained by watching others perform at their peak. But you aren't satisfied with watching. You want to be inside the experience. You prefer playing an instrument, creating something, solving problems, learning skills, or building projects. Activities where you are the protagonist and not a passive spectator. Neuroscience is clear. Directly experienced flow activates far more neural networks than observed flow. Watching others perform only stimulates a fraction of the brain system that activates when the experience is one's own. It's a diluted version of the real sensation. Research by Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, a world leader in the study of flow, shows that people who generate their own flow states report much higher levels of life satisfaction. You aren't giving up on emotion. You are choosing the full version. There is an unexpected twist in all this. Part of the difference may not be just psychological, but genetic. Research on the DRD4 gene, known as the novelty-seeking gene, shows that certain variants are associated with a lower tendency toward tribal behavior and a greater inclination toward individual experiences. This same genetic marker appears more frequently in entrepreneurs, artists, and people who have migrated far from their place of origin. That's why some scientists call it the explorer gene. It's the DNA of those who move forward first, not those who follow the group. There is also evidence that people with higher basal levels of serotonin do not need constant external dopamine stimuli to feel satisfied. They already start from an internal state of stability. For them, sports offer nothing that the brain is asking for. So no, you aren't broken. You might simply be a different variation, a different phenotype. While others need the noise of the group to feel alive, your nervous system works better in silence, autonomy, and exploration. Here the social cost appears. Sports fans often say you are boring, that you don't know how to have fun, that you're missing something. They might exclude you from conversations and make you feel strange. But that reaction says more about them than about you. Their need for you to also be interested in sports stems from their insecurity. The group needs unanimity to sustain the illusion. When you don't participate, you generate cognitive dissonance. If you don't need what they need, their obsession falters. And that's uncomfortable. They don't reject you because you are different. They reject you because you act as a mirror. You remind them, without saying anything, that their identity depends on something external, that their dopamine, their sense of belonging, and their emotion are rented to an entertainment product designed to exploit tribal psychology. And here is the conclusion. You aren't broken. You aren't boring. You aren't missing out on anything. You are simply a person who refuses to outsource your identity, your empathy, and your emotional well-being. You value real connection over parasocial fantasy. You create experiences instead of consuming them. You write your own identity instead of wearing someone else's brand. The next time someone asks you how it's possible that you don't care about sports, there's no need to argue. A simple sentence is enough. You care about things that also care about you. The truth is simple. You aren't broken. You aren't cold. You aren't boring. You aren't missing anything. You are just a person who refused to hand over your identity, your dopamine, and your empathy to a system designed to exploit human tribal psychology. While others seek belonging in symbols, you build it in values. While others need a jersey to feel part of something, you belong to yourself. While others consume someone else's emotions, you create your own. While others live life through third parties, you live it from within. You don't need someone else's victory to feel complete. You don't need a crowd to feel valid. You don't need an artificial tribe to know who you are. Your identity is not borrowed, it is constructed. Your sense of belonging is not external, it is internal. Your connection is not parasocial, it is real. So when someone asks you how it's possible that you don't care about sports, you don't need to justify yourself. You don't need to explain yourself. You don't need to defend yourself. It's enough to understand one single truth. You choose to guard your emotional energy, your identity, and your attention. You care about things that can also give you something back. You care about relationships that actually exist. You care about the experiences you build. And that is not a lack. That is evolution.